Hi, I'm John Gregg. I'm the news editor at the Valley News. Thanks for joining us. We're the daily paper in the Upper Valley based in Lebanon. For those of you who are new to the Valley, we were founded in 1952 and we cover 4 counties and statewide issues, Grafton County, Sullivan County, Windsor County, and Orange County. And we are hoping to do a regular show here on CATV, talking with reporters on their beats about stories that we're covering or stories that are coming up, and hope you'll watch along with us. Besides the print paper, of course, we also have a pretty robust website. You can find stories at vnews.com. And joining us first is Tim Camerato, who is our Lebanon and Muskoma Valley reporter and also covers a number of political issues for us. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John.
And Tim is here to discuss a story about a tunnel in the heart of the Upper Valley that might be of great interest to bicyclists and outdoor enthusiasts throughout the region. Here in CATV headquarters, we're right near the train tracks in downtown White River Junction. You may hear a little rumbling in the background. I also spend some time down in Bellows Falls, Vermont, which has a live rail tunnel, active rail tunnel running through the heart of that village. But who knew that Lebanon, New Hampshire has its own tunnel too? Tim, what's that all about?
Yeah, so Lebanon does have its own tunnel. It's about 300 feet long, and it runs underneath the Lebanon Mall. And if you think about where it starts, so it starts in the parking area, sort of right behind River Valley Community College. And then it goes underneath Hanover Street, which mostly is the Lebanon Mall. And then it ends about the area of Route 4. So it was created actually as part of the urban redevelopment of downtown. It was sort of an active rail line before that, and then you know, when in the late 60s, when urban redevelopment was finishing, they created sort of a bike and pedestrian walkway using it.
So was it ever used to carry rail traffic?
Yeah, it was.
And that carried rail traffic after the Big Lebanon Fire, right?
So it was actually before the Big Lebanon Fire.
Okay.
After the Big Lebanon Fire, it was created sort of as a bike and pedestrian walkway, and it was repurposed for that.
Gotcha. And I understand, though, there have been some structural problems. What have we learned about that?
Yeah. So the structural problems were actually first recognized when volunteers in the Muskoma River Greenway, and that's about a 4-mile rail trail that's going to connect downtown Lebanon to West Lebanon. When they were starting to do the planning and the beginning work on that, they noticed sort of what a lot of people were starting to notice, which is there was cracking above the tunnel, which has parking spaces, and that beneath pieces of cement were essentially falling off. And they brought it to the city's attention, and so what the city did about it was bring in some engineers who found that the concerns were pretty well founded and that there were some real structural issues there.
Right. So they closed off a bunch of parking spots right near the Lebanon Mall, right? Wasn't that what happened? Yeah,
so it's about 20 parking spaces right above the mall that were ultimately closed off. And the tunnel itself was closed too. So pedestrian traffic over the last about 4 years.
4 years
haven't been able to use it.
Yeah, okay, all right. And why are they talking about it now?
So it never really essentially stopped being talked about. So questions of what to do with the rail tunnel led to the downtown visioning study, which kind of took a broader look at what we want to do with downtown, but sort of a core question is, what do we want to do with the rail tunnel? And then there have been a number of community forums and surveys essentially asking people, do you want the rail tunnel opened? But the crux of sort of what's happening now is the city council has finally decided to reopen the rail tunnel and sort of picked a plan that will make that possible.
Right. And before we get into sort of the cost of all that, but just to reiterate for viewers, so you mentioned this Muskoma River Greenway and the rail trail. So that not only is intended to link West Lebanon to Lebanon, but that goes on quite a bit farther, right, from Lebanon?
Yeah, so it's the last spur of the Northern Rail Trail, which runs down, you know, essentially from downtown Lebanon right now all the way down to Merrimack County, the Franklin area it starts in, and it essentially runs up through there. So you can bike or walk if you want to, essentially from Merrimack County all the way.
Sure, so sort of from Lebanon all the way down towards Concord on this rail trail, off, not on main roads.
Yep.
And the tunnel They've talked about different things. Why do they feel they need to reopen it to make this rail trail work? Were they looking at other things near the river, for instance?
So yeah, so there's two things. There's essentially the community wants it open. Whenever they've brought it out to the community and asked questions of what do you want us to do about the tunnel, the community has overwhelmingly said we want it reopened. There have been talks of sort of another trail that would essentially go along the banks of the Muskoma River. The city ultimately determined that that would be a little bit too expensive, and they'd still have to essentially spend the money building that trail and then spend money filling in the tunnel, because the tunnel can't stay the way it is right now.
Because of the crumbling and the structural concerns.
Yeah.
Right.
It can't last forever in that condition. So.
Yeah. And how much is it likely to cost to fix it?
So this plan that the city council picked is about $2.4 million. So that's to reopen the tunnel, essentially structurally improve it, and then they'll also be building a skylight with a glass enclosure on top to bring in sort of natural light down into the tunnel.
Yeah.
It's about $2.4 million. Some of the other options they looked at have sort of been around the $2 million range. That extra trail along the bank of the Muskoma that we talked about, that would be sort of upwards of $3 million. Most city councilors don't think it'll actually end up costing $2.4 million. That's sort of the estimate from engineers.
Yeah.
They've included things in the budget that the city council essentially doesn't think will end up costing as much. Stairs, for instance, they said will cost about $100,000. Most city councilors don't think it costs $100,000 to set up a set of stairs.
Yeah, and will the skylight and the stairs, before they closed it, I think they had problems with some crime or littering and stuff. So will this help with safety issues too, do you think?
Yeah, people weren't very comfortable walking through the old tunnel all of the time because of some of the crime issues, because it was not necessarily well lit. So this will kind of help sort of integrate it more within the Lebanon Mall and within downtown Lebanon, so it's a much more visible, much more active part.
Yeah, and so they think it might not cost as much as the $2.4 million. Does the city have the money?
It's budgeted $2 million right now. Anything over that $2 million will have to be part of this year's budgeting season. So essentially engineers are expected to come back with a little bit more of an updated number, and the city council will have to talk about during budgeting season, which is usually sort of late fall, December-ish.
Okay. All right, Tim, well, thanks for telling us about this. Lebanon is along with Claremont, but Lebanon is kind of the largest city in the Upper Valley. It has about 13,000 residents, but the population is said to double during the daytime because of all the people going to Dartmouth-Hitchcock and the businesses and employers along Route 120 and the stores along Route 12A. So things that happen there have a lot of significance to the rest of the valley. So obviously we're hoping to be talking to you some more about other issues there. But while I have you, the other thing Tim does is cover a lot of politics for us. We're going to be doing at the Valley News previews of several of the legislative races that are going to be decided in November. So Tim's already written about a pretty interesting state Senate race in the Haverhill, Orford, Piermont area. Tell us a little bit about that, Tim. Who are the two candidates there?
Yeah, so you have Bill Bolton, who is a Plymouth Select Board chairman. He's been in Democratic politics in the past. He's run as a county commissioner representing that area for Grafton County. He's been pretty president. He's a former state official. He worked at the Secretary of State's office for some period of time. And he's facing incumbent Bob Guida, who is a Republican from Warren, sort of up in the North Country-ish kind of region outside of Haverhill. And sort of the big issues that seem to come up in that race are guns. Guns are a big issue, and sort of allowing guns in schools. Bob Guida has said that he's fine with current state law, which sort of allows guns to be carried into schools right at the moment. And Bill Bolton's against that. Another issue that comes up is
guns in schools, not by students or teachers.
Not by students or teachers, no, but members of the public. This came up in Rivendell a couple years ago. They had a state representative who was attending a basketball game as a security officer, and he carried a gun as a security officer into the high school up in Orford,
Yep.
and it became sort of a statewide issue after that. So they're split on that issue. They're also split on the Medicaid expansion. Bob Guida didn't support the Medicaid expansion, which covers about 50,000 people in the Granite state and provides health care for them.
Right.
And Bill Bolton is for that.
Right, and then also on education issues, I think there's some distinction between Senator Guida and Mr. Bolton.
Yeah, Bob Guida is very, pro-school choice. He supported school choice issues in the past. Bill Bolton does not. He would rather spend money essentially shoring up public schools in the Granite State. He has had 4 kids go through public schools, and he says that's a large part of sort of his factoring into that issue.
Yeah, well, that'll be an interesting race to watch. I think 2 years ago, Democrats ran someone named Charlie Chandler, who was also from Warren, and I think was a pretty good candidate, and he was not able to defeat Guida. But we'll see what happens this year with an expected heavier turnout.
It should be an interesting race.
Great. Well, Tim, thanks for joining us, and we're going to take a short break and swap reporters out.
Thank you.
Welcome to our weekly show where we talk about sports on our Facebook Live platform. And
He's
here
Josh
we are.
Weinrod. He's Josh Weinrod. I'm Dave Bailey, night editor, and this is the powder blue throwback edition
That's
of
right.
Just Sports Hits. All right.
Joining us now is Jordan Cuddemi, our courts and police reporter here at the Valley News. And Jordan, thanks for being with us. Vermont this year legalized the use of recreational marijuana, and that has spurred a growing focus on what are known as drug recognition experts on police forces. Jordan, who are these DREs and what are they for?
All right, so the DREs, they're specially trained police officers that look for impairment in drivers who maybe don't have a blood alcohol content, or they have a very low alcohol content in their blood, and they're maybe exhibiting signs of impairment.
Right, so they're needed because someone gets pulled over and police think perhaps maybe they thought they might have been intoxicated, but they don't appear, that alcohol doesn't appear to be an issue, but drugs might be an issue
Exactly.
in their driving.
Exactly.
Okay, and they're not new, right?
No, they're not new. I believe the method of testing came out with the LAPD in the 70s. They came to Vermont around 2005, or I guess Vermont started recognizing that method around 2005. New Hampshire also has them, so it's been around.
Right. So with alcohol cases, police would measure what's known as the BAC, blood alcohol content, and anything over 0.08 would be a problem. What's the situation with marijuana? Is there nothing to measure?
Right, so there is no threshold for substances other than alcohol in Vermont, so that 0.08 limit doesn't exist for drugs.
Right,
such
so
as
they
marijuana.
can't really take a test and say, aha, you've been smoking a large amount of marijuana and you're impaired. So what do these DREs look for?
So they look for drug impairment, and they do that through a series of tests that they perform. They look at a driver's eyes to see if their pupils maybe are constricted or dilated, and then they're going to match that up with signs and symptoms of certain drug categories, like narcotics or marijuana, which the symptoms change for the drug categories.
Right, so if they thought someone was high on cocaine, they would see one thing. If they thought someone had been smoking marijuana, they might show sort of different
Correct.
signs, right?
Yep.
Okay, and they also ask questions of motorists, right?
Yeah, one of the questions they ask motorists, they are looking to see if they've, smoked marijuana or been on a drug that could help lead to the conclusion
Okay.
on whether they're impaired.
Okay, I mean, and do they ask them, have you been using marijuana recently?
Sure, I believe that would be a question that they would ask.
Yeah. Okay, and how many people in Vermont were evaluated in 2017?
I believe it was about 65 people roughly were evaluated.
Mm-hmm. And what happened with most of those cases?
I think more than half of them, the DRE concluded that the individual was impaired by marijuana. That was the largest class of drugs. I think about 22 of them, the DRE concluded that the driver was not impaired.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily the officer who pulls a motorist over. Sometimes they have to wait for someone to come to the scene, or they go back to the police station or the barracks, right, for these
Correct.
tests
Yeah,
to take
the
place?
officers, generally the patrol officers don't have the special training, so the patrol officer would call in a DRE who would take the person back to the station, and the test would be performed at the station, not on the roadside.
Okay. What do defense lawyers have to say about this?
I think most defense lawyers would tell you that they are skeptical of the test because they say it lacks scientific validation and peer review studies.
Okay. But they're very common in other states, right? I mean, they're used across the country.
Yeah, they are used across the country. They're used in Canada. The National Highway Safety Council or Transportation Administration backs it. I think the Vermont Medical Society also has endorsed the method as well.
Okay. And there has been a focus, of course, Colorado legalized marijuana and has a fairly robust industry there. They do test for something, right?
Yeah, so in 2012, when Colorado legalized recreational marijuana, I'm not sure in what year, but the lawmakers tied 5 nanograms of THC in a person's blood. Anything over that would be you're legally impaired, like the .08 threshold. And I think some defense attorneys have said, you know, where did they get that number? Is it backed? And the defense attorneys around here would tell you that it's not, you know, scientifically validated.
But Vermont's not doing that yet. THC is the psychoactive element in marijuana. Vermont's not testing for that. And they would certainly need a law to do that, right?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The coordinator for this program in Vermont, the law enforcement coordinator, he says, you know, there isn't that scientific backing for the threshold limit. That's why Vermont hasn't, you know, put that limit in place or a limit in place.
Yeah, but are we likely to see more DREs in the meantime around Vermont?
I think so, yeah. There are approximately 50 right now in Vermont, and I think another 9 are going through the special training to become DREs. So I think by the end of September, there will be approximately 60.
Yeah, well, it's going to be an interesting issue as recreational marijuana takes even more hold in Vermont, and there become probably more challenges in the courts in some of these cases. So, Jordan, thanks for joining us. We'll
Thank you.
Hope to have you again.
Yeah.
And thank you, viewers, for watching. Again, I'm John Gregg, the news editor at the Valley News, and we hope you'll pick up our paper sometime and also check us out on the website vnews.com.